Fast, powerful, and stealthy.
We can fly around bad guys and them not even knowing that we're there.
The F-22 Raptor is America's enforcer-in-chief.
With an F-22 in the airspace, there is no sneaking around.
Its stealth technology, born of a Cold War need.
We were going to have to make a stealth platform from the ground up.
And developed so far under the radar that even those who flew it questioned its worth.
All the pilots were not sure that stealth was going to work.
All of this in a quest to build the most lethal and feared combat aircraft in the world.
The Air Force needed a lot more stealth aircraft as quickly as they could get them.
June 2014. The United States has been fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan for over 12 years. In nearby Syria, a new threat emerges: the Islamic State.
ISIS is an organization that has an apocalyptic end-of-days strategic vision and which will eventually have to be defeated.
U.S. war planners must tread lightly. Sending aircraft into Syria could destabilize the region even more. Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad is at war with his own people and with ISIS. He doesn't want America to interfere. ISIS knows the U.S. is reluctant to attack. From its base near Raqqa, it continues its violent provocations.
An American journalist has been beheaded by ISIS terrorists. The victim was kidnapped in 2012 while covering the war in Syria.
In September, the United States and a coalition of allies decide they've had enough.
I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
To accomplish this, airstrikes. Allied forces must wipe out ISIS targets, but avoid taking sides in the bitter civil war. The Pentagon plans to use all aircraft at its disposal, including its newest weapon, the F-22 Raptor. Stealth, speed, and air superiority. The F-22 Raptor has it all.
What is behind me is the premier air dominance fighter in the world, the greatest fighter jet ever built, which is the F-22 Raptor.
62 feet long, over 40 feet wide. The Raptor brings the thunder and the lightning.
The primary mission of the F-22 Raptor is to either shoot down other airplanes or drop bombs.
Air to air or air to ground, the Raptor has a lethal option for any situation.
We can carry 6 radar missiles, 2 heat-seeking missiles, as well as a couple hundred rounds of 20mm bullets, or we can also go to our air-to-ground loadout where we can carry either 2 1,000-pound bombs or 8 250-pound small diameter bombs. The F-22 is an enforcer, and we'll put the airplane up there to deter any threat that may try to impose their will.
September 2014. Al Dhafra Air Base, United Arab Emirates. 4 F-22 pilots from the 27th Fighter Squadron prepped their jets for a mission.
We had been in theater as F-22s for several years already.
Lieutenant Colonel Dave Williams served in the U.S. Air Force for over 17 years.
None of the F-22s had been used in combat up to that point, so the expectation was that we weren't actually going to be used for anything. But then at the very end of our 6-month deployment, we got the call that they wanted to use us in Syria.
Williams knows that flying into Syrian airspace means taking a dangerous risk.
We weren't exactly sure what Syria was going to do when we first crossed their border. One of our concerns was that Syria would actually mistake our entry into their country as an act of war against them.
The Syrians have an air force, anti-aircraft guns, and dozens of surface-to-air missiles, all keeping a lookout for intruders in their skies.
Because of their robust integrated air defense systems, stealth became more of a factor.
The Raptor is the Air Force's ultimate stealth fighter. It sneaks up to your house and then kicks down the door. Its design, classified, both inside and out.
For operational security reasons, we're unable to open up the cockpit and let you film inside the airplane. That's information that we don't want to share with outside sources.
There's one thing pilots can talk about. The plane's coating, called RAM. It stands for radar absorbing material. Its active ingredient, an iron-based compound designed to trap and reduce radar reflection.
The paint is like an invisibility cloak. We're adding it to the aircraft to absorb enemy radar so the enemy can't detect it.
To work, the coat must be seamless. Airmen inspect the Raptor's coating for defects after every flight.
If we notice a paint chip or a scratch in the paint, we'll bring it in here and strip it down and reapply, because any defects degrade the stealth capability of the aircraft.
The RAM helps make the Raptor nearly undetectable. On enemy radar, the 43,000-pound plane appears as small as a bumblebee.
We can fly around bad guys and them not even knowing that we're there.
At Al Dhafra Air Base, a 12-plane strike force lines up on the tarmac. Among them, 4 F-15 Eagles, 4 F-16 Falcons, and 4 F-22 Raptors.
It was pretty surreal experience. There was a flurry of emotions. Probably the biggest thing on my mind was making sure that we can get all of my guys safely to and from the airspace and execute the mission.
The plan is for the non-stealthy fighters to dip into Syria, take out ISIS command and control facilities, and then return to safe airspace as fast as they can. 2 of the F-22s are loaded up with air-to-air weapons in order to watch the strike forces back.
They were there to make sure the rest of the strike package was unmolested, that they could get in and out cleanly.
Not all of the mission relies on the Raptor's muscle. Williams and another F-22 are tasked with a job that counts on its stealth.
The mission that we had that night was to drop bombs on an ISIS headquarters building. It was actually pretty deep into Syria, very close to the heart of their integrated air defense systems. So F-22s were used because they could be stealthy. We were much more survivable against the surface-to-air threats.
At midnight, the fighters begin to take off. But just before Williams is cleared to go, trouble. An F-15 up ahead has a mechanical failure, shutting the entire flight line down.
We had a specific time on target for all of the airplanes that were going to the target that night. So for us to be delayed getting to the airspace was a significant emotional event.
The strike is a finely timed operation. All 4 F-22s must fly ahead of the other jets.
We wanted the F-22s to cross the Syrian borders first, just in case there was a response from Syria. If they did respond, the F-22s would be out front so that we could handle whatever response the Syrian government provided.
20 minutes later, the F-15 is pulled off the runway. Williams and the other F-22s are finally cleared for takeoff. With time slipping away, they push their jets as fast as they can.
I had my throttles in full afterburner to get to 1.5 Mach. Once I got there at 40,000 feet, I pulled them out of afterburner, and then I was still accelerating at 1.5 Mach. And we don't have other assets in the Air Force that can do that.
The F-22 is one plane that never comes late to the party. Two Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines make it one of the fastest fighter jets on the planet.
We can exceed Mach 2 or go faster than twice the speed of sound, which up high above 50,000 feet, that's roughly about 1,100 miles per hour. Each engine produces 35,000 pounds of thrust. So with both engines operating, you're getting 70,000 pounds of thrust propelling this war machine through the air.
The engines offer more than thrust. These bad boys let the Raptor super cruise.
The super cruise means that we can go faster or sustain speed faster than the speed of sound without using afterburner, which is the big flame that you see coming out of the airplane. The ability to fly faster than the speed of sound without using the afterburner is going to allow us to get to places a lot quicker than when people are expecting us.
40,000 feet above the ground, Colonel Dave Williams and his F-22 speed straight towards the target zone. 15 minutes after takeoff, he crosses into Syrian airspace, right on time.
When we did cross into the Syrian border, it was plainly obvious that there's a civil war going on. I could see tracer fire rounds going off all over the place.
Two F-22s stay close to the strike force, keeping an eye out for enemy planes. Williams and the other Raptor race further into Syrian airspace, counting on their stealth to shield them from surface-to-air missiles. If the mission goes well, it's a hard blow to ISIS. But in this volatile region, it's also easy for their plans to go wrong.
We had to be prepared. All of our concern and focus was on the Syrian regime to make sure that they understood that we were not there to start a war with Syria. We wanted to make sure that we did not start World War III.
High over Syria, F-22 pilot Lieutenant Colonel Dave Williams and his wingman prepare to drop a bomb on an ISIS compound. To the east, two more F-22s protect the strike force.
We weren't 100% sure what the Syrian response was going to be. Our biggest concern was making sure that if Syria did respond, it wouldn't escalate into something where we're now shooting missiles at each other.
Williams locks on to the ISIS compound and drops two 1,000-pound JDAM laser-guided bombs. Direct hit. 30 miles away, the strike force quickly follows suit.
I was actually distracted from watching my bomb blow up, watching the 40 small diameter bombs that the Strike Eagles lobbed at their target area. That was quite a show to watch.
The Raptors and the rest of the aircraft quickly return to safe airspace, undetected and safe from Syrian missiles.
Officially, that was the first use of F-22s in combat. We used the F-22s against those targets, one, because of the munitions that we carried, but in addition to that, our stealth capability gave us a lot bigger margin for survivability against the Syrian regime.
A stealth fighter's advantage is the element of surprise. But to truly understand stealth, you have to first understand what it's hiding from. September 1st, 1939, World War II erupts in Europe. Engineers all around the world develop high-performance bombers and fighters designed to cripple the enemy before they know what hit them.
By the time we get to World War II, there's been many technological advances introduced into the combat zone.
Yancey Melez is a historian at the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command.
Airplanes were flying higher, they were faster. The human eye was not going to be good enough to alert that there were incoming forces. You needed something, a piece of technology to do that.
That something is radar. Radar is created by an antenna which generates pulses of invisible energy called radio waves. These waves spread out over a portion of the sky. If a plane is in their path, the signals bounce off the aircraft and return towards the ground. The same antenna that creates the radar waves then captures those returning pulses of energy. A device called an oscilloscope translates the returned signals and displays the gathered information to an operator, revealing how far away the plane is, and most importantly, where it's headed. By 1940, Great Britain fully integrates radar into their national defense strategy, using it to alert the Royal Air Force of approaching enemy aircraft.
If the British had not had radar, their forces on the ground probably would have been decimated by the German Air Force.
It's clear radar is a game changer, but the Brits aren't the only ones who take advantage.
A radar was not a monopoly by one country. The Germans devised techniques to use their radar to direct the German pilots to the incoming Allied forces. And then once the German pilots actually saw the flights of bombers, they visually would start attacking them.
War planners must look for new techniques to avoid getting caught in radar waves.
There were multiple ways that you could avoid the radar. The most common one was to use chaff, and it was just large strips of tinfoil that you dropped out of the airplane.
Chaff consists of small fibers that reflect radar signals. When large quantities are dropped from an aircraft, they form a cloud that temporarily hides the aircraft from radar detection. Another tactic? Overloading the radar network.
The British actually were really good at this. They would flood the German radar network by sending a whole bunch of the airplanes towards the radars, and then all of them would break off and go to predetermined targets. So the German radar had no idea where to direct the fighters to because they had overloaded the German radar network.
Generals on both sides know that outsmarting enemy radar is key to winning air battles to come. By the Cold War, radar isn't just used to see aircraft coming, it's used to shoot them down. August 1955. The United States is locked in an arms race with the Soviet Union and worried that it's on the losing side.
We believe that the Soviets are actually building more bombers than we have. So we really want to see what's going on in the Soviet Union.
Finding out what the Kremlin is up to isn't easy. The Soviets have an advanced early warning radar system along their border.
The Soviets, they're using their radar to not only look and see that the enemy's coming, but they also use their radar to alert their jet forces to go up and actually attack.
The U.S. considers a solution. Some believe that the best way to stay safe is to fly high.
We introduced the U-2, which flies very, very high. We believe that if we could fly high enough, the U-2 was untouchable by current technology that was being fielded by the Soviet Union.
But America soon learns that there's a difference between a spy plane and one that is stealthy.
On display in Moscow, what's alleged to be the wreckage of the U-2 spy plane, which Russia claims to have shot down by rocket.
The U.S. knows Soviet radar is tough, but the shoot-down reveals the power of their new surface-to-air missile, the SA-2.
The SA-2 was an advance because it could reach very high altitude.
Dr. Rebecca Grant is an Air Force author and historian.
This SA-2 could track an incoming aircraft from many miles out, lock onto the radar signature, and send a very lethal, accurate missile right into that incoming jet.
So the United States started talking about how can we make it where the Soviets can no longer see our airplanes? And that was the very early introduction of stealth.
December 1964, Palmdale, California. The Air Force tests its top-secret spy plane, the Lockheed Martin SR-71. It's designed to outfly any Soviet missile.
The SR-71 is just one wicked platform. 3 times the speed of sound, flew at above 80,000 feet. That's 16 miles above the Earth, 3 times as tall as Mount Everest.
At its max altitudes, 80,000 feet and above, surface-to-air missiles simply ran out of energy.
The SR-71 doesn't just rely on altitude and speed. This jet is modified for stealth. Dark paint acts as camouflage against the night sky and leads to its nickname, Blackbird. Its thin body and tapered sides help deflect enemy radar, making the 100-foot-long plane appear smaller than a man on radar. But the Blackbird is a plane designed to spy, not drop bombs.
The Air Force knew they really had to be able to attack these key targets. But the only way to do it was to devise a little fighter bomber that could use stealth and penetrate to deliver those weapons.
And we couldn't just take an existing platform and attempt to make it stealthy. We were going to have to make a stealth platform from the ground up.
November 1975. Engineers at Lockheed's Skunk Works launch a secret program to build the first pure stealth aircraft. Using advanced mathematical equations, designers calculate how visible their prototypes will be on radar.
In order to achieve stealth, the entire external design of the aircraft has to be controlled. And the Skunk Works team knew how to tackle that problem as a practical matter and not just some equations on the page.
Engineers move away from smooth aerodynamic surfaces, committing instead to designs with facets and sharp angles, which they calculate will better deflect radar signals away from its receiver. By 1977, Skunk Works test their most stealthy design yet, the Have Blue.
They flew them multiple times from 77 to 78, and both of them crashed, unfortunately. But they proved that you could build a stealth airplane. By 1978, you see that the Air Force is very, very interested in taking this technology and adapting it to an operational platform and to build what eventually becomes the F-117 stealth fighter.
November 1988. The Air Force reveals Lockheed's latest and highly classified stealth aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk.
The F-117 was perhaps the most top-secret fighter ever developed. It was critical that the Russians not get wind of America's success in developing stealth technology.
65 feet long, 43 feet wide, the F-117 Nighthawk looks like a fighter from another galaxy. Based off the Have Blue design, its shape makes it nearly invisible. To enemy radar, it's the size of a baseball.
The reason for that is because the angles on the airplane do not present the radar signature back to the radar.
One drawback, payload. To keep its shape stealthy, weapons are limited to what can be stored inside.
The internal weapons bay of the F-117, the size limited it to carrying basically 2 1,000-pound bombs. You can't hang bombs off the outside of the 117 and have it still be a stealthy fighter.
Designers know if it only carries 2, they'll have to be precise.
It was a precision-guided platform. If you look at the airplanes that actually could deliver precision-guided munitions, the F-117 was one of those platforms.
The F-117 was built for stealth, but when war breaks out in Panama, the Nighthawk is needed for its aim. December 1989, Operation Just Cause. Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega declares war on the United States. U.S. generals respond with a plan. Drop 2 laser-guided bombs near the Panama Defense Barracks in downtown Panama City. The goal is to stun the troops into surrender. The Air Force chooses the F-117.
The F-117 had a precision bombing system. So that made it a natural choice for the operation in Panama.
Over 3,000 miles away in Nevada, 2 F-117s take off and head to Panama. At 1 a.m., they reach their destination and unload their weapons. AC-130 gunships and AH-64 Apache helicopters quickly surround the area. By sunrise, the base is secure.
So the Panama mission was a good first combat test for the F-117. It was a long, rigorous flight with a precision weapons drop.
The operation proves the new Nighthawk can hit its target, but its stealth is still untested.
There wasn't much of a threat for the F-117 from Noriega's air defense system.
The Panama raid did not prove that the F-117 could handle a full-up integrated air defense system. That was simply a question mark.
January 1991. Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein refuses to remove his invading army from neighboring Kuwait. The U.S. and its allies decide it's time to act. The coalition prepares a full-scale air war, dubbed Operation Desert Storm. The plan: to bomb Iraqi hotspots and bring Hussein to his knees. The only problem: how to get their aircraft in to do it.
The Iraqis had the most integrated air defense system in the world.
Major General Greg Feast was an F-117 pilot with over 800 combat hours.
They had radars that would locate aircraft coming in right when they got over the border, and then they had thousands of AAA guns and thousands of surface-to-air missiles they could launch at the coalition aircraft as they came in to hit their targets.
The Iraqi defenses are controlled from a command post deep in enemy territory. The U.S. needs a plane that can sneak in and take out the command post before the Iraqis know what hit them. The aircraft they choose: the F-117. January 17th, King Khalid Air Base, Saudi Arabia. Night 1 of the war. 14 F-117 pilots anxiously prepare their jets for flight.
Our mission was going to be entirely different than Panama. Operation Desert Storm was going to be the first test of the stealth fighter against any real threat.
It's a hell of a test for the unproven fighter. Fly through hundreds of radar sites without setting off alarms.
There was a lot of apprehension by all the pilots. We were not sure that stealth was going to work. The engineers had told us we'd be able to get in there and get out, but we were not positive. So we were going to have to go in and find out whether stealth was really going to work.
Feast completes his final pre-flight checks, gets into the cockpit, and starts his engine. He's the first to take off and racing against the clock.
Timing was very important. We did not want to be early because once the first bomb hit, the sky would light up and all the other aircraft coming in after us would have to fly through that AAA and through those SAMs.
The F-117s fly in formation all the way to the border. As they cross into Iraq, they begin to go stealth.
Some of the things we do are turn off any type of lights on the aircraft, pull in the antennas so that there's no apertures sticking outside of the aircraft that can be detected by radar. Once we did that, we could no longer talk to anybody. We couldn't talk to our wingman, we couldn't talk to a tanker. We were alone.
All alone, Feast gives it gas and bears down on his target. He knows there is no turning back.
You think to yourself, I can't talk to anybody. What if they wanted me to come back and not deliver this bomb?
Feast has over an hour before he reaches his target. A long time to be flying on faith.
The F-117 is not an invisible aircraft. It's a low observable aircraft. So it's hard to detect on radar, but it can be seen.
On the ground, hundreds of Iraqi air radar sites keep watch for him and the other coalition aircraft.
And hopefully the stealth characteristics that the engineers told us would work would save us.
January 1991, deep in Iraqi airspace, F-117 pilot Major General Greg Feast is ready to drop the very first bomb of the war.
I was very relieved because nobody knew I was there. I was able to concentrate on tracking my target and delivering my bomb.
His bomb of choice, 2 bunker-busting GBU-27 laser-guided bombs.
That was a 2,000-pound bomb that we used to penetrate targets that other bombs couldn't hit. We were the only aircraft that could carry that weapon.
The only catch? To be accurate, Feast must deploy the bombs below 10,000 feet, well within the line of fire.
Our worry below 10,000 feet was not only SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, but also anti-aircraft artillery, AAA. There was a lot of it in Iraq, and we were worried at any second we could be hit by some type of AAA.
Feast lines up the target, checks his bombs, and fires. Direct hit. 90 minutes later, Feast makes it back to base and checks on the Nighthawk pilots following behind.
I thought to myself, I'm not sure all of our pilots are gonna be as lucky as I was. So when I saw that each one of them had checked in, I was relieved. To me, I started to believe in stealth technology at that point.
It's a major success for the stealthy fighter. Over the next 8 weeks, it remains undefeated.
And we flew 1,271 missions in the F-117 during Operation Desert Storm, and not one piece of damage, not one bullet, not one SAM, nothing ever hit any of our aircraft.
There weren't many skeptics left after Operation Desert Storm. Everyone knew that the F-117 was a true stealth fighter capable of precision bombing against almost any target in the world. And what that told the Air Force was they needed a lot more stealth aircraft as quickly as they could get them.
April 1991, Washington, D.C. The Air Force commits to Skunk Works' latest stealth fighter, the Lockheed YF-22 Advanced Tactical Fighter.
It had to go way beyond the F-117, have lots more speed, better maneuverability, onboard avionics, onboard radar, and advanced stealth. So to get that, they had to go to a far more sophisticated design that would put back some of the aerodynamic curvature.
6 years later, at Dobbins Air Reserve Base, Georgia, the public gets its first look.
The F-22 looked more like a traditional fighter, and part of the reason they were able to do this was that computer design technology had progressed, so they were able to more quickly evaluate alternative shapes without having to rely on strict angles and facets in order to do that.
Right away, the new stealth plane impresses with its speed.
The F-16 chase plane assigned to keep up with the F-22 had trouble keeping this sleek new fighter in range. The F-22 was a roaring success.
But the new plane is still far from combat ready. And when war breaks out in Yugoslavia, it's the F-117 that answers the call. January 1999, Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic's parliamentary troops kill 45 ethnic Albanians, including women and children. The international community is outraged. By March, they decide they've finally had enough.
If President Milosevic will not make peace, we will limit his ability to make war.
A NATO coalition of 19 countries begins Operation Allied Force. Generals decide to strike Serbian military installations, crippling Serbian forces.
The plan was for this to be several nights of pinpoint strikes against strategic type targets.
Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko flew the F-117 for over 5 years.
So the idea was, okay, if we take out very, very selective targets to Slobodan Milosevic, he would come to the bargaining table and he would agree to NATO's terms.
The Serbian air defense is a lot like Iraq's. A capable air force and plenty of SAMs. It's a natural fit for the F-117.
Because of this success in Desert Storm, there was this feeling and sense that our stealth capability would be very, very effective and unstoppable. And as it turned out, that was not a good attitude to have, and we greatly underestimated the Serbian warfighter.
March 27, 1999. Aviano Air Base, Italy. The 4th night of the war. Zelko prepares to fly into Serbian airspace. His mission: take out a key military command center near the Serbian capital, Belgrade.
My target was in the Belgrade area, one of the most heavily defended cities in the world.
F-117 pilots fly with confidence. Carrying out their mission is almost too easy.
The first 3 nights of very effective stealth strikes definitely added to the sense and attitude of we're invincible and invulnerable. And I thought, if there was ever a night for an F-117 to get shot down, it's tonight, and it's my mission.
Not long after takeoff, Zelko reaches the Serbian border.
I went into stealth mode. Single ship, not talking, radio silent, not emitting the transponder, completely alone and isolated.
With stealth as his only defense, Zelko gives it gas and flies straight towards a maze of Serbian air defenses.
And it was almost a full moon night, so there was that huge threat of, can they visually see me? That was always on our minds anytime we had moon illumination.
Zelko quickly reaches the Serbian command center unopposed. Moments later, he deploys his bombs.
Once I confirmed visually on my center display that I successfully struck the target, my mind shifted to now I needed to make my way back to Aviano Air Base safely.
Zelko's stealth has worked so far, but maybe not for much longer.
I knew that the most heavily defended part of the airspace was still ahead of me.
His route home takes him through a maze of Serbian radar-guided SA-2, SA-3, and anti-aircraft artillery sites. Less than 2 minutes later, Zelko's worst fear is realized.
I was looking outside the cockpit, and that's when I saw him. 2 missiles punched through this really low deck of clouds, and I thought, they got me.
March 1999. F-117 pilot Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko is deep in Serbian airspace. 2 radar-guided SA-3 missiles are headed straight for him.
As the missiles were coming at me, I was still holding out with that shred of hope.
Seconds later, one of the SA-3s flies directly over Zelko's cockpit, narrowly missing his jet. But Zelko isn't out of the water yet. Another missile is barreling towards him.
I thought, man, that's gonna run right into me. And sure enough, just was a really, really, really good shot.
The stealth fighter came down near the Serbian capital, Belgrade. its pilot rescued by a special team and taken out of the country.
It was an absolute miracle that I survived the shoot-down. And reflecting on that today, I couldn't feel more grateful and I couldn't feel more blessed to just be alive.
It's a wake-up call for the Air Force. Their fighter is stealthy, but not invisible.
It turned out that stealth technology alone is not the magic answer.
The F-117 had done a tremendous job yet again, but it was time to move on to a more advanced form of stealth for future air combat against more advanced enemy air defenses. What we need now is the F-22.
2004, Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. The F-22 is finally ready to go.
It achieves what they call initial operational capability. That means the F-22 is ready to go to war should commanders request it.
Each Raptor costs approximately $143 million. By 2008, the Air Force is short on cash and deactivates the F-117.
The F-22 could now drop munitions and hit the ground, but it also could do the dogfighting. It could do the air-to-air mission. And the F-117 never had a radar. And the F-22 does have a radar, and it can see very, very far.
So other fighters rely on the F-22 to detect enemies in the battle space, to chase them down, and to broadcast that big picture about what's going on in the air battle back to our friendly forces.
But in addition, it can get very, very close because it's stealthy and the enemy cannot see it.
The F-22 Raptor is so capable, the Air Force trusts it with its most important duty, defending the homeland. 2011, Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska. F-22 Raptors are on alert, ready to respond to any air threat to America's northwest border.
In Alaska, every day, at any hour, we've got jets ready to go, protect the coastline up there.
Major Chris Burns served as an F-22 pilot in Alaska.
With the increasing terrorist threat these days, you don't really know when you're going to need that type of fighter.
Their mission, to stop foreign aircraft from sneaking into the U.S.
Even if they send the best fighters, they won't be able to detect the Raptor. The Raptor will be able to detect them. Game over.
In June, Alaskan North American Air Defense Ground Control receives a ping on their radar. At least one Russian bomber approaches U.S. airspace.
We had indications that it was a Tu-95. We didn't necessarily know how many, and we didn't necessarily know if there was going to be any other platforms embedded with the bomber.
The Tu-95 is one of Russia's most ferocious bombers, designed to drop nuclear bombs and other deadly loads. U.S. ground control isn't certain of Moscow's intentions. And with U.S.-Russian relations in decline, the Air Force can't be too careful, especially when a bomber's involved.
Their long-range bombers have the capability to get to points along our coast to release weapons to strike our cities.
Major Burns suits up and prepares for takeoff. The Russians are a dangerous adversary. Byrne knows this encounter could lead to all-out war.
It was kind of surreal. This could turn bad really quickly. We're loaded with live ordnance. We're not sure if they're loaded with live ordnance. We don't know what their intentions are.
"60 minutes later, Byrne catches the Russian bombers. He and his wingman are reluctant to get close. But ground control needs to record the bombers' tail numbers. They task Byrne and his wingman to find them out. Under the cover of stealth, Byrne and his wingman maneuver closer to get a better look.
When I flew underneath the Tu-95, that was the first time that reality set in. This could be a dangerous situation.
Byrne approaches the first bomber, unsure if his Raptor appears on their radar. In a moment, things could turn for the worse.
Flying next to a foreign aircraft, not talking to that foreign aircraft, being loaded with live weapons, not knowing the intent of that foreign aircraft is a recipe that could lead to disaster.
June 2011, high above the Alaskan coastline, F-22 pilot Major Chris Byrne and his wingman sneak up on 2 Russian bombers. The Russians can't see the F-22s right under their tails.
Them not knowing where you are and you just showing up on their wing. There's a little bit of job satisfaction there, but there's also the reality of this could escalate quickly if things went downhill.
Byrne and his wingman continue to shadow and radio the bombers' tail numbers down to ground control.
We got the tail number, and then we moved back to a standoff position to shadow and monitor. We manned that location for a little bit longer, and about 30 minutes later, the Russians proceeded home.
The F-22s are so stealthy that the Russians might not have known they were ever there.
We never knew what their intent was. In fact, I don't think we'll ever know what their intent was. But the important thing is that we were there. We're in a position to engage if they decided to display any type of aggression.
It's a job well done for the stealthy F-22 and a display of strength to America's adversaries.
With an F-22 in the airspace, there is no sneaking around because the F-22 has the stealthiness and the radar to be able to detect the movement of any enemy aircraft in a huge battle space.
It's clear the F-22 dominates the skies, but its power comes at a cost. Since 2008, over 25 Raptor pilots have experienced oxygen loss mid-flight, occasionally blacking out.
In the end, it was terrible publicity for the stealth aircraft. No one wanted to hear about pilots blacking out or having problems caused by their airplane.
By 2012, the Air Force discovers the culprit: an oxygen valve on the pressure vests Raptor pilots wear when flying. The problem requires total replacement of every valve, costing taxpayers millions. But the pressure vests are not the only piece of the Raptor that requires a safety check. At Langley Air Force Base, each Pratt & Whitney F-119 engine is removed from the Raptor and tested for potential malfunctions. Air Force mechanics from the 1st Fighter Squadron run the engines in a soundproof exhaust facility called a hush house. The Air Force works to certify the engine's longevity through a series of rigorous tests, making sure there are no leaks, mechanical faults, or other performance malfunctions. It's a necessary process to ensure the F-22s can still fly long into the future, but it's a costly one. That's more money for a program the Pentagon has already spent more than $67 billion on. On May 2nd, 2012, the last F-22 rolls off the production line.
The production line is closed, and right now, the Air Force has no plans to replace the F-22 because it's still at the very leading edge of fighter technology.
But the F-22 isn't the only stealth plane of the future. The Air Force's newest fighter can also deceive radar.
The F-35 is one of the latest pieces of stealth integration. It has this stealth capability, but it also has these enhanced sensor suites that allow it to sniff out different information and then passing that on to be examined by intelligence people.
Meaning the F-35 is both a stealthy fighter and a reconnaissance platform. Stealth is no longer exclusive to America. Both Russia and China are developing their own stealth fighters, and more countries will likely follow.
The Air Force knows that stealth is the future of air combat. To dominate in air combat, the Air Force will have to have stealth fighters on the line, defending and deterring against any threats that might arise.
First to cross enemy lines, stealth fighters are the Air Force's hidden heroes.
If you have the element of surprise, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the war.
Whether it's hiding from early radar or the latest tech, mankind's quest for an invisible plane remains.
I think it'll be a requirement forever. I don't think we are ever going to have non-stealthy aircraft again.
Because with our stealth aircraft, we can dominate anything that an adversary puts up against us.
In tomorrow's wars, whomever remains hidden gains the advantage. And as new threats rise, the United States will continue to rely on the stealth fighter.